Virginia City, Nevada, 1867. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. The sun has been down for 2 hours, but the town is just waking up. Light spills from a dozen saloons onto C Street, mixing with dust kicked up by boots and horses. Inside the Sazerac saloon, a fiddle scrapes out the opening bars of a schottische. 20 men crowd around the entrance to the dance floor, clutching silver dollars. They've just come off 12-hour shifts in the Comstock mines, 1,000 feet underground in darkness and heat. Their faces are scrubbed clean, but their hands still carry traces of rock dust in the creases. They're waiting for the girls. And then the girls appear. 6 of them, stepping through the back door in bright calico dresses with ribbons in their hair. They're German immigrants, most of them, none older than 25. They're called Hurdy Gurdy girls, though not one of them plays a hurdy gurdy. They don't sing. They don't serve drinks. They don't go upstairs with customers. They dance. That's it. That's the job. $1 a dance, a few minutes per dance. A hurdy-gurdy girl could earn $50 on a good Saturday night, more money than most miners made in 2 weeks. And here's the remarkable part. In the roughest, most violent mining camps in America, these young women carved out a profession that was physically exhausting, socially complicated, but surprisingly respectable. This is their story, not the romanticized version you might expect, but the real one. The economics, the exhaustion, the surprising dignity of women who danced for dollars in places where civilization was barely holding on. The name hurdy-gurdy makes no sense if you know what an actual hurdy-gurdy is. It's a medieval stringed instrument played by turning a crank. Think of a mechanical violin crossed with a music box. The sound is droning, repetitive, vaguely carnival-like. European street musicians used them for centuries. But in American mining camps of the 1860s and 1870s, hurdy-gurdy became slang for the dance halls where immigrant girls worked, and eventually for the girls themselves. Nobody's quite sure why. The best theory is that early dance halls in California mining camps during the gold rush featured actual hurdy-gurdy music, and the name stuck long after the instruments disappeared. By the time Virginia City boomed in the 1860s, hurdy-gurdy houses were common across the West. They operated in Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Nevada, and California, anywhere men outnumbered women by ratios of 10 to 1 or worse. The format was standardized: a dance floor, a bar along one wall, a small stage or corner for musicians, and a separate room where the girls could rest between dances. The girls themselves were almost always immigrants. Germans dominated the profession, but you'd also find French, Irish, and occasionally Mexican women. Most came from working-class families in Europe. They'd crossed the Atlantic seeking better opportunities and found America's East Coast cities already crowded with immigrant labor. So they went west, following newspaper advertisements promising good wages for respectable dance hall companions. What they found was work that was simultaneously harder and better than they'd imagined. The business model was elegantly simple. A miner wanting to dance approached the bar and paid $1. The bartender handed him a brass token or a ticket. The miner presented this token to a girl, and she danced with him for one song. When the song ended, the girl collected the token and turned it into the house at the end of the night. She kept 50 cents. The house kept 50 cents. That 50-cent split was better than it sounds. A good dancer could complete 15 to 20 dances per hour on a busy night. That's $7 to $10 per hour. Astronomical wages for working-class women in the 1860s. Factory girls in eastern cities earned $6 per week for 60 hours of labor. Domestic servants earned slightly less. A talented hurdy-gurdy girl in a booming mining camp could earn $300 per month, but she had to work for it. The physical demands were punishing. Most dance halls operated from 8 in the evening until 4 in the morning. That's 8 hours of near-constant dancing. The dances were energetic: schottisches, polkas, waltzes, quadrilles, no slow swaying. These were fast European folk dances that required stamina and coordination. The girls wore long dresses with multiple petticoats, standard Victorian fashion that added weight and restricted movement. They danced on rough wooden floors that were often uneven or splintered. Their partners were miners who'd been underground all day, whose hands were calloused and whose coordination was compromised by exhaustion and whiskey. A girl might dance with 60 different men in a single night. Some partners were polite, others were drunk, clumsy, or aggressive. Between dances, there was barely time to catch your breath before the next token holder appeared. The only breaks came when business slowed, usually around midnight when the early shift miners headed home to sleep, and again around 2 when the crowd thinned further. The heat was oppressive. Saloons in summer were stifling, packed with bodies and lit by kerosene lamps that added to the temperature. In winter, wood stoves created zones of extreme heat near the stove and cold drafts everywhere else. The air was thick with tobacco smoke, sawdust stirred up by dancing feet, and the smell of unwashed men who'd worked all day in the mines. Yet the girls kept dancing. Because the money was real, and the alternative jobs available to immigrant women paid a fraction of what they could earn here. The drinks were part of the system. After each dance, the miner was expected to buy his partner a drink. The girl would order what looked like whiskey or brandy. It was usually cold tea or watered-down alcohol. She'd take a sip, maybe 2, and then abandon the glass when the next dance started. The house charged the miner full price for the drink and pocketed the profit. This arrangement added another revenue stream for the saloon while preventing the girls from getting drunk on the job. This drink protocol reinforced an important boundary. The relationship was transactional and temporary. You bought a dance and maybe a drink for the lady. That was the extent of the interaction. When the song ended, so did the obligation. This structure was crucial to maintaining the distinction between hurdy-gurdy girls and prostitutes. That distinction mattered deeply to the women who worked as hurdy-gurdy girls. They were not prostitutes. They did not go upstairs with customers. They did not provide sexual services. Reputable hurdy-gurdy houses enforced this boundary strictly because their business model depended on it. Prostitution was common in mining camps. That's an undeniable fact of frontier history. Brothels operated openly, and some saloons had cribs upstairs where prostitutes worked. But hurdy-gurdy houses were different establishments with different rules. The dance floor was visible and public. The interactions were supervised. The girls went home or to boarding houses when their shifts ended. Contemporary observers were clear about this distinction. Writing about California mining camps in the 1870s and 1880s, historians noted that hurdy-gurdy girls were generally considered respectable and were expected to conduct themselves with propriety. An account from Montana described the girls as not immoral, merely unfortunate immigrants trying to make their way in a rough country. Of course, the public didn't always see it that way. Respectable frontier women, the wives of merchants and lawyers, viewed hurdy-gurdy girls with suspicion and disapproval. Dancing with strange men for money in saloons at night? That was scandalous by Victorian standards, even if nothing else happened. Church groups and temperance societies regularly campaigned to shut down dance halls, lumping them together with brothels and gambling dens as dens of vice. But the miners? They knew the difference. The men who frequented hurdy-gurdy houses weren't looking for prostitutes. They were looking for female companionship, however brief. They wanted to dance with a woman, hear her voice, feel her hand in theirs. In camps where men outnumbered women dramatically, where loneliness was a constant weight, 3 minutes of dancing was worth $1. The financial arrangements were more complex than the simple 50-cent split suggests. The girls paid room and board to the dance hall owner or to separate boarding house operators. This typically cost $1 to $2 per day, which covered a shared room and basic meals. Some owners charged the girls for their dresses, arguing that the colorful costumes were a business expense. Other owners provided dresses as part of the job. The girls also faced fines for various infractions. Arriving late, refusing to dance with a paying customer, arguing with minors, or causing trouble could result in deductions from their earnings. Some owners used fines as a control mechanism, extracting additional profit from the girls' labor. Others were more reasonable, only imposing fines for genuine misconduct. But even after paying room, board, and occasional fines, a successful hurdy-gurdy girl could save significant money. Some worked for a season or two, saved their earnings, and then moved to established towns where they opened boarding houses, restaurants, or other legitimate businesses. Others found husbands, miners who'd struck it rich, or merchants who'd built successful enterprises. The pathway from hurdy-gurdy girl to respectable frontier businesswoman wasn't uncommon. The West was more forgiving of unconventional pasts than Eastern society. If you had money and conducted yourself properly, people asked fewer questions about how you'd earned your stake. This social mobility was part of what drew immigrant women to the mining camps, despite the hard work and dubious reputation. The dangers were real, but different from what you might expect. Physical violence from customers was rare in well-run establishments. The saloon owners employed bouncers, usually large men who'd worked as miners or freight handlers, whose job was to maintain order. A miner who got too aggressive with a girl would be ejected immediately and banned from returning. This wasn't altruism, it was business. The girls were the attraction. Protecting them protected profits. The real dangers were exhaustion, respiratory illness from the smoke and dust, and foot injuries from 8 hours of dancing in inadequate shoes. Some girls developed chronic leg pain or joint problems. Others suffered from the erratic schedule and poor nutrition. Tuberculosis was common in crowded boarding houses where girls lived in close quarters with poor ventilation. There were also emotional tolls. Dancing with drunk miners who made inappropriate comments, maintaining a cheerful demeanor when you were exhausted, smiling through boredom or disgust. This emotional labor was unacknowledged but constant. And there was the social stigma. Even girls who conducted themselves irreproachably knew they were viewed with suspicion by a respectable society. Yet many former hurdy-gurdy girls, interviewed decades later, spoke positively about the experience. They'd earned good money. They'd seen the wild frontier during its most chaotic period. They'd achieved a measure of independence that would have been impossible for working-class immigrant women in other circumstances. One former dancer, interviewed in 1920, said simply, "I have no regrets. Those were hard years but good ones." The hurdy-gurdy houses began declining in the 1870s and had mostly disappeared by the 1880s. Several factors contributed to their demise. First, the mining camps themselves became less wild. As towns matured, more families arrived. Women's presence changed the social dynamics. The overwhelming male-to-female ratios that had created demand for hurdy-gurdy houses gradually equalized. Men who wanted female companionship could court actual local women with the prospect of marriage rather than paying for dances. Second, moral reform movements gained strength. As frontier towns established schools and churches, pressure mounted to close establishments that violated Victorian respectability norms. Some jurisdictions banned dance halls outright. Others imposed strict regulations that made them unprofitable, limiting hours, requiring expensive licenses, or banning alcohol on premises. Third, the economics changed. As mining camps boomed, labor costs rose across the board. The girls demanded higher wages. At the same time, the novelty wore off and attendance dropped. Saloon owners found it more profitable to expand their gambling operations or convert the space to other uses. But perhaps most importantly, the railroad arrived. Rail connections brought more diverse entertainment options, traveling theater companies, opera singers, legitimate dance troupes. Miners who'd been starved for entertainment now had choices. The simple appeal of dancing with a hurdy-gurdy girl couldn't compete with more sophisticated amusements. By 1885, hurdy-gurdy houses had become relics of an earlier, wilder period. A few lingered in the most remote mining camps, but the golden age was over. The girls moved on, to other work, to marriage, to different towns. The saloons converted to gambling halls or closed entirely. Today, almost nothing remains of the hurdy-gurdy houses themselves. The buildings were cheaply constructed and have long since burned, collapsed, or been demolished. A few photographs survive showing the girls in their bright dresses, their expressions serious for the long exposure, times required by 19th century cameras. Museum collections hold some of the brass tokens used for dances. Local historical societies preserve scattered accounts and newspaper mentions, but the human stories are harder to recover. Most hurdy-gurdy girls were working-class immigrants who left few records. They didn't write memoirs. Their names appear occasionally in census records or city directories, listed simply as domestic or waitress, euphemisms used to obscure their actual work. Tracking their later lives is difficult, though some clearly prospered. What we know for certain is that thousands of young women worked as hurdy-gurdy girls across the American West during a brief 20-year period. They earned more money than most working women of their era could dream of. They maintained boundaries that preserved their respectability, at least in their own eyes and in the eyes of their customers. They endured physical exhaustion, social stigma, and the harsh realities of frontier life. And for lonely miners working in darkness underground, these women provided something valuable: 3 minutes of human connection. A chance to hold someone's hand, to move to music, to remember they were more than just labor in a hole in the ground. That was worth $1. That was always worth $1. The hurdy-gurdy girls, $1 a dance in the mining camps. And for a brief moment in the American frontier, they built their own version of independence in the least likely place imaginable. A saloon dance floor in the middle of nowhere, where civilization was still deciding what it wanted to become.